It's 10:05 London time, so let's begin. Welcome to today's bootcamp focusing on Corda MGM, the next gen Corda network setup, and so basically Corda 5. I'm Peter, as some of you probably very familiar with me. I'm from the developer relations team, and today I will show you what does the Corda 5 network looks like. So let me go to the agenda first. So we're gonna have 5 sections. The first one is like intro, just quickly explaining to you what is it, right? To be exactly. And then we're gonna, so after you know what is it, there will be 2 types of networks in Corda 5. And the third one is group policy. It's another new terminology in Corda 5, and go into the setup sort of walkthrough of the 2 different types of networks. All right, let's begin. So the first one, introduction. So what is the MGM? It's short for membership group management. So in the Corda 5 times, you know, if you attended our previous sessions, well, if you don't, it's on YouTube, youtube.com/Corda blockchain. So basically at the Corda 5 times, we abandoned the concept of physical node. Every identity on a network will be a virtual node in a Kafka cluster. And MGM basically is the service that's help you populate and manage the Corda 5 network. You can, if you are familiar with Corda 4 Enterprise, there's a tool called Cinnamon, right? Corda Enterprise Network management tool. So basically, MGM, the membership group management tool, is the successor of Cinnamon. And so all of the entities that you want to join a Corda network has to be approved, and their identity need to be sort of verified against a certain rules, but that's more on the technical terms. And in the section 4 and section 5, actually, in the dynamic networks sections, you will see what exactly we mean by that. And second, you know, Corda facilitate certain network rules through MGM. So when you try to set up a Corda 5 network, you need to set up MGM operator node first. Whatever you call it, the X500 name, but you need to basically have an operator to begin your network setup with Corda 5. And after you set up your network operator node, what we call, you can call it the MGM node, then you can begin expanding your application network to start inviting or start accepting requests to join the application network. So that's basically the concept of MGM. It's a service, it's a tool that's help you onboard digital identity to your Corda 5 Corda network. It's a service that you can, it's a service that offers you network operations, and it's the beginning point of your Corda 5 application networks. So that's basically is the fundamental concept or MGM on the very high level. All right, next slide. So there are a few related concepts related to MGM. The first one is members, right? So when you set up application networks, the goal is to start inviting or accept requests from different members. So what are the representations of members? That will be its holding ID. So in the previous sessions at the CSD demo, right, when I run a local testing like static Corda network, you see that Alice Bob, they have a short hash, and that holding ID basically is the identity of the members. And if you okay, hold on. Yes, the holding ID is a combination of the network, a group ID, hash, and the X500 name. So that's in the combination. So that's the holding ID is each member will get. So if you think about it, so at our very first bootcamp about Corda 5, we explained that each Corda 5 clusters can hold multiple virtual nodes for the same entity. So let's say Alice can have multiple virtual nodes in the same clusters, but they belongs to different application network. So that's basically how it's possible, because Alice's holding ID basically is a combination of the network group ID plus its X500 name. So now, the ID of the virtual node is not, how would I say, it's not unique to that identity. It's unique to the identity in one application network. So that's the first thing related to the MGM. And second is, after registration with the MGM, the member will have valid public/private key pair and be visible to other members of network, be able to use flow sessions to communicate with other members to network. So that sort of is correlated with the third point of the previous slide, right? So it's a beginning point of application network setup. So you have to set up the MGM first in order to have a Corda network. Next one, on the functionality side with MGM. So MGM enables the application network operator to set certain rules, right? So as a network operator, you have the permission or like the authority to allow certain members to run certain flows, to allow certain member to prohibit certain member to run certain flows, approve slash declines new members, obviously. And third one is distribute the member list to members. That's sort of happen automatically. And lastly is MGM runs as a virtual node in the cluster, creates and operate many application network on the same Corda deployment. So that's sort of is a more general concept if you are if you have a class, like you are a cluster owner. So if you think about the role in operating in Corda 5, now you have the cluster owner, right? Who are in charge of setting up a cluster, Kafka cluster, Corda 5 cluster, to host all the virtual identities. And today we talk about MGM. And as a MGM node operator or MGM operator, you're in charge of set up the application network, dependent on whatever clusters that you want to set up your network. And one cluster can have multiple MGM running multiple application networks. So that's basically is the relationship. There's a question. So I saw there are two Gradle tasks in CSE environment, creating group policy and create key store. Are they called MGM when combined together? I don't understand your last bit of the question. Are they calling MGM, or are they setting up MGM? So actually, that's a great question, because that will go into our next section. I will answer your question in the next section. Second question is, I'm trying to understand the application network. In this, would every Corda application run in an individual application network? Okay, so yes, actually I realized, I should really do a recap on this. So let me try to find if I have the slide handy. Give me a second. All right. So I'm sharing my screen. Blah, blah, here. Here. Okay, so maybe this one. No, this one is not a good one. Maybe this one. No. So let me see. Okay, so this one. Okay, so I'm sort of doing a little bit of recap on the concept of application network. So on the screen right now, you are I couldn't, yeah, on the screen right now. So basically, the right part of your of the screen. So what we are seeing here is a cluster, right? Inside of the clusters, we have our Alice, Charlie, and Bob, and then we see we have Alice again. So in the quarter 4 time, this is almost impossible because you can't have a node, you can't have 2 nodes representing representing the same identity, because it's going to confuse your counterparties, like which node am I sending my flows to, right? So that's quarter 4 time. Well, of course, there's alternatives. You just change the X500 a little bit, and then you keep telling your counterparty which node you want to transact with, right? So there's the solution. But at quarter 5 times, what we change is basically the relationship between a Corda network and the Corda cluster. So the Corda cluster is where you allocate resource to set up the distributed identity, and we basically unbind, right? Like release the network with the node. So what you are getting is at one cluster, you can have a multiple network, and the identity now is binding with X500 plus the network ID. And that's basically how you can have multiple network within the same cluster and allow you to have a multiple virtual node for the same identity, but they are operating in different networks. And to your questions, would every Corda application run in an individual application network? Yes, because every time you want to basically run a business, you need to have a network, and that network is solely dedicated to your applications. And don't worry about, okay, what if I have my identity want to start another business with the same cluster, with the same group of counterparties I work with? You just start another network, just like this. The same identity Alice can both join network 1 and network 2, doing different business, but it's still Alice. Does that answer your question? Okay. All right, cool. Thank you. All right, so back to the MGM. All right. So we are here. Okay. So the next slide is actually section 2, right? Network types. And this is where I'm going to talk about CSD, right? So to answer the first question. So we have 2 types of networks for Corda 5 at the moment, right? Corda 5 beta 1 release. So the first option is static, is test purpose predetermined virtual nodes / members, meaning you define your participant, the name, X500 name, no trace name, like all that, and then you hit the button, and well, I mean not hit the button, you type some command, and then a single cluster will start, and you don't need MGM, and you will not have MGM to set up communication between one another, because it's a static. You cannot onboarding, offboarding participant after you set up the static. That's why it's called static. It's very easy. You only need to configure basically a JSON of the name of your participant, and then you hit the button and then it will start. It also works because all of the TLS port of the communication port between one another, the connections are automatically bootstrapped for you. So you don't need to worry about network management. So you can see it as there's no network management. And the second type is the production one. The production one is dynamic. It's meant for production networks. Well, you can also it allow you to do testing across multiple clusters. So that's another thing that we haven't covered. I will explain in a bit. So you can do testing when member in test network aren't predetermined, meaning you can't onboard new participant. All members must be registered with the running MGM before transacting among groups, and MGM is responsible for distributing member data across clusters. So basically those two, meaning that you have the ability to operate a MGM and you have to do it. So that's basically the difference between static and dynamic. And let me explain a little bit here. I feel like it's a new knowledge or new thinking point for everyone. Is the word multiple clusters. Because since we present Corda 5 contents from the beginning, we have always talked about clusters, relationship between virtual node and the clusters, and the relationship between virtual node and virtual node, and the relationship between virtual node, and then today we're talking about MGM. But we never talk about multiple clusters. Is it because it's not a thing? No, it is a thing, and it's actually the production way, or that's the most legitimate way to have a network. So step back a little bit. So when we say clusters, and I say cluster basically is the service that you offers your resource, offers your service to set up your virtual identities. But have you ever wondered who is the owner of the cluster? So at the Corda 4 times, right? Because every node itself is an identity and is unique. So your counterparties, right? So for example, if you're running a business between 5 counterparties, have 5 nodes, boom, you're done. And everyone is basically operating their own node, and if any things happen to the node, it's their business. You are just a participant of the network. Everybody is everybody's on the same weight. Everybody, like you and me, we both know. But at the Corda 5, there's the concept of the cluster, and then when we talk about it, we say is horizontal scalable, is vertical scalable, right? It helps you to deploy 1,000, 10,000 virtual nodes at your premises, right? At your cluster. But that's sort of is you gotta when you think about it, it's okay, wait a minute. But does that mean that I need to start hosting for my counterparties? Does that mean that I need to sort of be responsible for anything happen to their virtual nodes? Am I controlling their keys? So well, if you choose to do that, yes. So the cluster owners have basically the power to basically shut down any node at any moment, because you are the cluster owner. Or if you are unhappy, you just shut down the cluster. So you got to understand that. So now that will brings the concept of multiple cluster. So in a very ideal Corda 5 legitimate setup world, every participant of a business, they should be responsible for their own cluster. And if they are only doing simple business, they will be only one virtual node representing themselves in their clusters, and they will connect their clusters with your clusters and your friend Charlie's clusters, your friend Bob, your counterparty business partner Bob's clusters. And regardless of how many virtual nodes in their clusters, it should be what you are hosting as a company or as an entity is a cluster. So all the virtual node, horizontal scalabilities, vertical scalabilities is a way to take care, your subsidiary hostings. So for example, I'm a large company. I have like 10,000 customers below me, but they all sort of want to do business with the other 10,000 companies under my counterparty, my business partner, Bob, right? So Bob and I, we will both start clusters at our virtual machines, and my 10,000 customers, below me, they will be virtual nodes. And that setup is a scalable, high available, decentralized setup for everyone, because then they will be using the event-driven workers to manage their own keys, stuff like that. So yeah, so again, so a lot of talk, back to here. So that's what we mean by, testing across like operating across multiple clusters. And MGM is basically the key that allow you to talk to the other clusters. Okay, so let's see, check out the QA a little bit. So the CSD, so you see two Gradle tests in the CSD, create a group policy and create a key store. Are they calling the MGM when combining together? So yes, so well, no, also not yes, like no, they are not calling MGM, but they are setting up the network. Because in the next section, I will explain what do you need to set up a network. And what they are doing is they are setting up the static network. So for test purpose only, right, you define, so if you are in the CSD right now, so if you look at, there should be a folder called config, and inside the config folder, there should be a JSON called a devnet.json. And in the devnet.json is where you define your mock, your fake static network identities, X500 name and the node-tree name, etc. And then the create group policies will take that, populate into a group policy.json, and then create key store will create some fake keys, well, not fake, like just a test purpose certificate, and then package it into the CPI, deploy the network, and then boom, your static network is set up. So again, CSDE, you will have the option to one click set up a static network with the combined workers. That's another thing. We talked about it last time. So CSD is all combined workers. Next question. Can members of a network, for example, Alice, host their own virtual nodes separately from the main network deployment on-prem in their office or their own cloud infrastructures? I see what you are asking. So let me go. So we can all go through this. So basically at the Corda 5 time, you need the clusters, and the clusters basically where you get your virtual node. And the virtual node are instance or processes that running in the cluster. So I think no, but I mean, I will double check. and well, I know you, so I can privately reach out to you and then explain, tell you the answers when I get like a legit, like a real feedback. But my guess is no, because the virtual nodes are created via the processes running in the Corda 5 clusters. I don't think you can host a virtual node outside of the Corda clusters. So, but I mean, if you are really trying to just have the virtual node at your own office, you will have the option to set up your own clusters, and in that cluster that lives in your office, there will be only one virtual node, which is Alice. It is a very complicated way, but I think it can get what you want, right? If you really care about privacy, securities, for that, just like I want my virtual node at my own office, you can set up your own clusters and then connect your clusters with whatever main network you're talking about. And as long as you join their application network via the MGM approving you to join, then you can. Yeah. With static, are you referring to the network bootstrapper job? Well, so network bootstrapper is a path, mate. It's the Corda 4. So now it's just it's a CSD. So if you are here for Corda 4, it's the wrong session. Or again, you can go to the YouTube to look at our Corda 4 sessions. This is Corda 5. And Corda 5, you don't need to manually play with the network bootstrapper anymore. Okay, yeah. Thank you, Node. Okay, thank you, nodes. Thank you, nodes. For cluster here, does it mean Kubernetes clusters? No, it means Kafka clusters. Kubernetes is a deployment tool that we offers or to deploy event-driven workers, right? You can't do anything if you only have a Kafka clusters. The Kafka clusters are only for internal communication between the different processes. The Kubernetes are the actually physical carrier of the event-driven workers, and that will allow us, right, R3 Corda to have a horizontal scalabilities. I suddenly have a enormous, significant amount of traffic or flows, right? As a Corda turn. Coming to my virtual node, I just horizontally scale another workers to take care of all those flow requests, and that's done by Kubernetes. Okay. All right. So little quick question time, right? So I know everyone cannot use chat, but just drop the answer in the QA, then yeah. So to feel a little bit engaged, right? So what are the two components required to create a membership holding ID, right? The network group ID /hash, network name, X500 name, IP address. So it's a multiple select, right? All right, we have one coming. I just realized, so if I click answer live, will it populate the answer to the QA as answer? But isn't that everybody gonna see? Okay, anyways, this is just a little exercise for everybody to feel engaged. Okay, so all right. I will announce the answer. So the answer is A and C, right? So again, right, being a member of an application network in Corda 5 times, basically your member holding ID need to be somewhat representing which network you are in, at the same time representing who you are. So we had the answer is A and C. Is network group ID / hash and X500 name. All right. Thank you for the people who answered questions. All right. Next one. So what is an MGM not used for? So this is a single select, right? So A, approve / decline new members. B, create new X500 names. C, distribute a membership list to members. And D, enable application network operator to set rules. All right, so that's quick. So I already see people answering. And yes, you are correct for whoever was typing the answer, so it's B. So the MGM is not used to create X500 names. All of the virtual node identity are created by the clusters, and it's actually created by the individuals who are applying to joining the clusters. So it's the cluster owner who gonna create the X500 name for each individuals. And in the last sections, when we talking about dynamic network setup or like the steps of setting up a dynamic network, you will also see the exactly moment that's like who and how the virtual identity is created, and then you will realize, okay, so the MGM doesn't create the X500 name for the new members. And plus A, C, and D just like sounds like what the network operator does, right? So, all right. Now we're gonna start talking about a little bit more technical. No coding, promise. But so this is like more concrete on exactly the things you will be interacting when Corda 5 release, the Corda 5 GA. All right, and the things you need for MGM. So the most important thing of MGM is the group policies. Whether it's a static network or it's a dynamic network, you need to create a group policies. For static network, it's easier. You can like auto-generated, and then for dynamic network, you need to spend time and then actually care about what you put in the group policies, because it's going to affect how your network gonna roll. So what's usability or utilization of the group policy? The most intuitive way when you think about it is, after you create a group policies, that group policies will be packaged with a CPB, Corda package bundle, right? So this is like Corda, and then that will become a CPI, Corda package installer, right? At my previous sessions, I talk about, when I talk about application network. So when you deploy, you only need a CPI to register your virtual node with the network. And now you see why. Because you have the application, right, CPB, and then the network info, the group policies, and then both of them are in the CPI. And of course, like there's a key signature and all that, like technical stuff. And that CPI, you just deploy to your virtual node, and boom, you are done. You don't need to take care any other, onboarding, offboarding. This is it. That CPI will onboard you automatically. Well, that's not okay. So I'm taking that back. So not onboard you automatically, but allow you to join network automatically. You still need to configure a little bit for the production environment. Opened up TLS, registered P2P communication, like all that. But this is us for now. For the Corda 5 beta 1 release, we still have time until GA, so we might have the opportunity to automate those things, those steps. And engineering, they are actually considering it, but it just depends on their roadmap and schedule if they can actually automate it. Second, a group policy can be created using Corda CLI, or if joining a group, exported from MGM. So this, I'm gonna talk about that in the next two sections. And group policy types, again, corresponded to the static network. You have the static network member group policies, and second, MGM group policy. It doesn't carry that much information when you beginning to set it up, but the group policy is gonna populate more and more and more, because for a dynamic network, when you like deploy the MGM virtual node, like there's no other participant. But for the static network, when you deploy, there's already like everybody there. So the group policy for static is more is fixed, and it's already populated at the beginning. The MGM is a little bit empty. It's actually just one JSON, but the MGM one will get populated as we go down the line. All right, so static, right? So membership setup, initiating a static network. What exactly do we need to do? So the first thing first is, one of you mentioned CSD, and I actually have CSD handy, right? So let me stop sharing and then share both CSD and the slides together, side by side. All right. All right. So this is the CSD. All right. And you can clone it from the GitHub. It's just called CSD Corda template -Java, right? So as one of you point out, yeah, I am sharing my screen. So as one of you point out that they are actually multiple Gradle helpers to help you to set up a static network. So let's look at it. So the first one is create group policies. So corresponded to these Gradle helpers. And the next one is create Corda CPI, create virtual nodes, register virtual nodes with auto-gen static network. So this is more like more general. And for the CSD, it's actually show you the exact step. So the first one is create group policies. And as I mentioned, if you go to the config folder, right? You go to the config folder, you will see there's a devnet.json. And this JSON is where you define your static network participant. I have the Alice, Bob, Charlie, and I have a node tree with the name node tree rep1, right? So basically I have four virtual nodes. And let me just show you. So if you really care, create group policy, like really like step by step, what's how does the code, like the group policy JSON is generated. You can also look at the code of the Gradle helpers. So basically the create group policy will take the devnet JSON and then populated the group policy.json. And as I said in the previous slide, the static network group policy is populated from the beginning. Once you create it, it's going to look like this, and it's not going to change. You just take this and then package to your Corda, become a CPI, and then that's your network. And you see all of this endpoint is all like pre-configured, and all those like certificate is all pre-configured, like automatically generated. All this, and that's basically is your static network group policies. And you the first step. Second step, you create key store, and that's basically how it's just the way how you package the CPI, right? You need to take the Corda right? The IOU, and then you take the network info, the group policy, and then you need like a keys, right? You need the keys, and step 2 will generate those keys. Third step, build the CPI, corresponding to this step, deploy the CPI, deploy to network, and then next one, create and register virtual node, create virtual nodes, and then register virtual nodes with automatically generate set network. So FYI, for static network, the most direct way is just start one using the CSC. So no doubt about it. And I urge everyone to actually give a try to play with a Corda 5 network from the CSC. Like, you don't need to worry about Kafka. You don't need to worry about Kubernetes. You don't need to worry about event-driven workers. You don't need to worry about like the P2P, TLS, all that. So just to get a hang of Corda 5 first by playing with a static network. Yeah, cool. All right. So that's a static network. Next, we're gonna talk about some like hardcore deployment stuff, right? So as I mentioned, I will share the link in the chat for everyone's preference. And yes, so the first link I'm sharing is the MGM onboarding. So the second one is member onboarding for dynamic network. All right, so then let's jump to jump to the dynamic network, the last sections of today. So what does it take to initiate a dynamic network, right? In like previously at the beginning, when we talk about MGM, we say MGM run as a virtual node in the cluster, create and operate many, so no, just the first part. So MGM run as a virtual node in the cluster. That means in order to have a dynamic network, you need to first create the MGM node. And the steps are here, member onboarding. No, not this, MGM onboarding. So this guide is assuming that you already have a Corda Kafka cluster deployed, whether it's locally or virtually. And I can tell you a trick, which is I thought about it for a long time, but I finally figured it out. So it doesn't stop you, or it allows you to just use the combined worker from the CSD. So the performance is gonna be terrible because he's using a combined worker, not like a legitimate individual event-driven workers, and that. And you can, but it's easy to you, because I think the second webinars that we host, I try to deploy a real Corda 5 cluster, single cluster locally at my machine with Kubernetes, with Minikube, with Docker, with Minikube, Postgres, Kafka, Zookeeper, all that. And it's just like I couldn't do it because I was also presenting, screen sharing, all that. Like it eat up my CPU pretty much, eat up my memory, so I couldn't do it. And actually the step is pretty complicated. You need to use Helm chart to deploy everything. You need to register the event, the image, container image to your local registry to do that. So here's the trick. Just use the CSD. Click the start Corda. It will give you a combined worker single cluster. You can try to deploy a dynamic network on that. And there's no blocker to prevent you to do that. The performance is not gonna be as like what you expect, and you cannot set up a multi-cluster setup. So if you're talking about a legitimate multi-cluster setup, you need to actually start from scratch. but that's probably we will maybe have another session on that. But if you just want to try, then you are not satisfied with a static network, you can use the combined worker, but you can deploy a dynamic network. So okay, so that's just a little trick. I realized, I figured out. So all right, so let's look at it. So the first step, passing the root CA. So you're setting up a network, you are starting a network, you are the big boss of the network, you need to have a root CA. So that's basically the first step. The second, build and upload the MGM CPI. And I annotated what says might be modified in the future release, because there are two steps you need to do. First is to create a group policies. We also have it here. This is the group policy. Like as I mentioned, like this is it, because you are setting up an empty group policy. And as for the static network one, you see like this is like long, right? You are populating the group policies, and then you got to package it and upload the CPI. Similar to what you need to do with static network, you need to take a CPB and then the JSON like group policy you just created, and then make it become a CPI. So that is your MGM CPI. But the reason I say it might be modified in the future release, because this step is really redundant, because you are basically you in the write-up, you are also you will realize you are packaging an empty CPB. So basically you are packaging for the sake of packaging. The reason is the network, the virtual node or Corda cluster only accept CPI. So you cannot just pass in the group policy, like which is the real thing that it matters. So you have to, for the sake of packaging, do the packaging. So that's why I'm saying like it might be modified, might be a way in the future release. It's just like you are allowed to just pass in a group policy. You configure some rules, and then just pass it to the cluster. And the cluster will recognize, oh, okay, what you're trying to do is set up MGM. Then we will accept just a JSON rather than a CPI. So that's currently might happen. Next step, create an MGM virtual node. Well, it is what it is. You need an entity to actually do the work, right? Load soft HSM for MGM virtual node. So this is like for all the key management. And set up TL. Okay, so I'm going this like really fast. But if you want to look at like step by step, we have an instruction in the link that I just shared. You can, the next is set up TLS key pair and the certificate. Next one is register MGM virtual node with the created network. So basically the created network is the MGM CPI that you just upload, right? You register yourself onto it. So it's a little bit like, sounds dumb a little bit, but if you really think about it, you are uploading the MGM to the cluster. So at that moment, there's no MGM virtual node. So you're just creating a network out of nothing. You need an entity to actually able to own that network. And that's the step, is you register MGM virtual node with a created network. So basically connect the CPI with the MGM virtual node. And the last one is open P2P messaging for MGM virtual node. So that's the last step that you need to do. So after you do that, your MGM node virtual node is set up, ready to accept incoming request to join the MGM virtual node, MGM network. So this is basically the network that's you are controlling, and so that's basically the setup for the MGM, like the network operator. And what you need to do next, like logically, is like, okay, I want to start onboarding members. right? So for the member setup, it's a little bit different, but is somewhat similar. So if you think about it, operating a virtual node at Corda 5 is, okay, you need to create a virtual node, you need to register it with a CPI so you can perform, flow transactions. And that's basically the simple concept. So for the MGM, right, I create the CPI, I register my node, I create my MGM virtual node, and then I register my virtual node with the CPI. And for members, it's the same. However, in terms of the group policies thing, so now this basically is where you create a linkage between your going to create virtual node and the MGM. So you need to export the MGM group policies from the MGM virtual node, or at that moment it should be called MGM group, right? Actually the network. So basically you are taking the group policy.json from the MGM node that you just set up, from the network you just set up, and then build and upload the core dApp CPI. So this is your actual dApp, right? Core dApp, your IOU core dApp. You are packaging your core dApp, IOU core dApp, with the MGM group policy that you just download from the or you got a pass from your MGM virtual node, you inherit it, and then you build the CPI. And typo, create the member. Wait, am I? Oh yeah, it is typo. So the next step is you take the CPI, that CPI is not the MGM CPI, it's the core dApp CPI. You create a member virtual node. Again, you load your soft HSM for member virtual node. So that's a must to do because it's for all the public key, private key, right? Ledger keys for your member node. And then you set up your TLS key pair and the certificate. You open the P2P messaging to communicate with MGM virtual node. Note is the other way around for the MGM virtual node. So for the MGM virtual node is he register and then he opened the P2P messaging, right? Register and then open the P2P messaging. But for the member, he gotta open the P2P messaging first, right? And then go register. Well, it makes sense because you actually need to talk to the MGM node in order to fire your request, right? And obviously the last step is register the newly created virtual node with a sending network. Build the registration context. It's just a sender API, and then get registered with the membership. And currently the approval is automatic, I think. But you have the options to decline the request. So that's complete the cycle of join a dynamic network from a member's perspective. And for, again, step by step, right, exactly how you do it is in the second link I shared. I see there's another questions. Where's my QA? Oh, here. Can you please share only one window? When both windows are shared, both of them look small. Oh, my bad. I only saw this after my presentation. But I'm not expecting you to actually read any of this. I'm just like showing you, okay, so as reference. So the MGM onboarding, the member onboarding, and for the present. Okay, so let me just show the presentation again. Stop share. Okay, so basically the past 10 minutes we covers the steps to initiate a static network. For the static network is it's pretty easy. You can just do a simple click from the CSCE, and then it will give you a static network. And you have the options to play with it. The different adding different participants in the devnet.json is in the config folder. For the MGM setup, it's a little bit more complicated. Well, quite a lot more complicated. You need to first set up the MGM virtual node, and get registered, create a network, open the P2P messaging for incoming request, member joining request. And the next step, when you want to register a member to join a dynamic network, you need to get the group policy from the extending network, package it with the actual Corda app, where you flow transactions, stay contract, and then build it into a CPI. Create a virtual node, set it up, open P2P messaging to fire, and then fire a registration request to the MGM virtual node. So, so that's the step to join a member into a standing dynamic network. We have another quiz coming up. So what are two components are required to create a CPI? Okay, so I feel like now this is very easy. So any takers on the questions? So A, CPB, B, group policy, C, list of members and X500 name, and none above. So this one is also a multi-select. All right, so yeah, it's A and B. So it take a CPB and the group policies. All right, so thanks for whoever participate. Okay, so I think the next is the thank you part. Yeah, right. So we haven't decided our next bootcamp yet, because I think Corda 5.2. No, Corda 5.2. Corda 5 beta 2 will release in March, but the date is not defined yet. But we probably will plan our next bootcamp according to the release time, and we might change our the topic as well. So join our developer portal at developer.r3.com. And as I mentioned, our homepage, I think, is having some issues. Let me see if the issue is resolved. Well, no, it's still experiencing issues. But the link is developer.r3. Oh, so it's coming back. Okay, all right. So let me quickly to show everyone. So yeah, so this is our portal, right? So developer.r3.com, and you can follow our events at the event page, right? This is today's sessions, and in a few hours, there's also the American sessions that you can go. And we have an in-person event, I think, still happening at our London office on March 8th. So if you're interested, register. Definitely, if it's happening, or like where is, if we cancel it, we will announce you as well. But the events page is where we're gonna post our future events. We also have blogs, etc. So yeah, developer.r3.com. All right. Thanks everyone for coming. Oh, there's another QA. So do you think any chance Corda 5 can be used with Java 17? So actually, engineering is thinking about upgrading to Java 17, but the time, I don't have it. Time and schedule, I don't have it, but I think they are planning it. May I know what network mean? Kubernetes cluster or Kafka clusters? Well, okay, so we kind of circulate back about on that again. So we have a sessions on YouTube is the Corda 101. So in that, like I was explaining a network more thorough, but in short, a Corda network is a network that allow your Corda identity to communicate with one another. And communication is, of course, Corda transactions via triggered by the Corda flow. And the physical format of a Corda network in Corda 5 time is the CPI. Originally at the Corda 4 times, there's the cinnamon, there's a network bootstrapper to take care of that. But today we're talking about Corda 5 is the application network, is the CPI. For static network, you predefine your group policy and then package it into a CPI, and that's your network. For the dynamic network, you create an empty MGM group policies, you start a network, and then you start onboarding member one by one. So it's not a physical concept as to Kubernetes clusters or Kafka clusters. It's the connection between the virtual nodes is the concept of a Corda network. Okay. Thank you, nodes. Okay, so there's a problem in setting up Swagger UI. Is there any video on starting Swagger UI? So, well, what do you mean there's a problem in setting up Swagger UI? So I think at my session previously with the CSE, I was using the Swagger. I don't think we have any issue, but like me, okay, feel free to email us, right? So devrel@r3.com. I'm typing our email into the chat. Join the slack.r3.com, right? Okay, let me post the thank you page, right? So thank you page, right? Yeah, slack.corda.net, and I also share my email, like our email, in the chat. Yeah, to answer your questions, I need more information. All right, that will be it for today's session.